guys are able to join us this evening from wherever you're at, your living room, from your kitchen, your home, your car, wherever it is that you find yourself right now. I want to say God bless you, and I hope that you are staying busy during this time of quarantine. I know that it still continues to be a challenging time, a troubling time, which kind of led into what I want to speak to you today, this evening. And I think that with everything that's going on, it's safe to say that a lot of our plans have been ruined. It's safe to say that a lot of things didn't quite go the way that we expected it. It's safe to say that maybe we're dealing with problem situations, issues that we just weren't ready to deal with, extra stress that we weren't ready to deal with. I know some of us are dealing with job loss. Some people are dealing with, we had a lot of people that had to deal with not getting to graduate from school and share that awesome moment and that milestone in their lives. There's kids who are missing out on school and are having to stay home, and they're stuck and they're bored and they're just creating havoc for their parents at home. But I know that in the midst of everything that's outside of our control, it can bring a little bit of frustration to us. And so I titled my message tonight, "My Broken Will is His Greatest Worship." And as we get further along, I want to explain what I mean by that. But I think that in a troubled time like this, where things aren't exactly going the way that we expected, a lot of us tend to
From some of our listeners from that show saying, I learned more in that interview than I have in the documentary. So
the fact that nothing went as planned, the fact that we had wanting them to go. We're dealing a lot of times with a little bit of a shattered will. You know, and when I was thinking of this, for the word will, it says to control deliberately. It says control deliberately exerted into to do something or to restrain one's.
they're not going to get it solved until the season.
Definition means is that by me wanting my will to be done means I want control. I want things to go my way. I want things to go the way that I had planned for them, not anybody else's way, right? So I think that right now we're in a time where we're dealing with a little bit of a broken will. And I want to talk to you guys about the story that's found in Mark chapter 14, verse 3. Because I want to explain to you guys how sometimes a broken will, even though you feel like everything's out of your control,
But I understand your frustration now. And
can actually lead to
what Steve Keim and company's given him.
wherever you're at. If you have your Bible, if you have a Bible app, if you want to go ahead and just listen in, I know we're going to.
That he can take what Isaiah Simmons.
Mark chapter 14, verse 3, it says like this. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Verse 4 says, some of those who were present were saying indignantly to one another, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. But verse 6 says, leave her alone, said Jesus. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. Now, let's go back a little bit and talk about here. So the story is about, right? We're reading off of Mark. But if we go to the Gospel of Luke, this woman is actually referred to as a sinful woman. As a prostitute. Okay. Now, in that time, as it is today, being a prostitute was no easy burden to bear. It's not a career by choice. It's not a job that you what I want to do. It was something that it was done out of desperation. You're talking about women content by other women because they were looked down upon. You're talking about women who were looked at by men as transaction or in exchange for goods.
This is a bad word. My resentment of the fact that they didn't.
Desperation, where their only survival
Offensive lineman, probably a little bit there in the fact that.
was for them.
Pull that away. Just go with what we've got.
No, because, and again, he was the best player available, and many people were surprised he fell that far. And I'll give you that. But I'm a professional team. I don't need a player that fits in different positions. I want a single
Who were in this position Often
one position. If it's inside linebacker, outside linebacker, corner, safety, I want him to be
to be in, but you seem to find no way out. And so you're
You're right. Maybe shame on them then if they don't know
everyone else because you are
into the 20
position that you never wanted to be, but everything led you there.
what position he's going to
Here we find this woman.
best. I'm stumbling over myself because I'm a little confused.
Simon's house. Jesus has actually been invited to Simon's house. Simon the leper is what Mark tells us. Because this woman knew that Jesus would be there. Okay. Now, if we go back a little bit, the Bible doesn't necessarily tell us how this woman encountered Jesus for the first time. How she came to hear about him, or how she came to know about him, or how she had, what experience did she have with Jesus that made her want to come to this home and show up when she found out that he would be there. But she did. So this woman shows up, and in a span of a few moments, as Jesus is there eating dinner, she does one of the greatest acts of worship that we see recorded in the Gospel of Mark. It says that she takes a jar of expensive perfume and she breaks the jar and she begins to anoint Jesus. And in all wholehearted worship, she breaks the jar and she begins to anoint Jesus. Okay? Now, it would be enough to say, wow, this is the ultimate act of worship. She's showing her love and her devotion for Jesus in that very moment. And even as we continue throughout the story, you'll notice how Jesus forgives this woman, how Jesus, offers his love, his kindness, his compassion, and his mercy to this woman. And that's a story within itself, right? We come to church and we experience Jesus and we receive his love and his compassion and it changes our lives forever. And that's a story of its own. But what I want to go back to is the actions of this woman and how meaningful they actually are. What is so significant about this event? Number one, the story tells us that this perfume was expensive. And if we continue reading, one of the men who's there actually rebukes her and says, why is she wasting the perfume? It would have cost a year's salary. So we know the worth of this perfume is a year's salary. So the perfume was expensive. And I remember that this woman was doing something that she didn't necessarily enjoy. She was doing something that might have brought her pain and might have brought her shame. So if you're talking about a jar of 1 year's worth of salary, you're talking about one jar that's equal to 1 year of pain, to 1 year of shame, to 1 year of regret, of having encounters with men who treated her like garbage. So 1 year's worth of salary actually equals 1 year of shame for this woman. So that's the first thing I want you to notice. This perfume was expensive. It wasn't something that she could have just given up for no reason. Now the second thing, not all women during this time, theologians believe that not all women wore perfume because perfume was very expensive, especially the kind that she was using. And it was believed that the only women who usually wore perfume were the ones who were prostitutes, who lived this life. Why? Because it was a form of advertisement. It was a way in which they would advertise themselves. They would advertise their bodies to other people, and they would say, wearing the perfume meant I'm available. I'm available. And so it was an advertisement for them. So I want you to pay attention to this. One, the perfume was expensive. So she was parting with everything that she had. It was worth over a year of her salary. She was parting with everything that she had and what she had to endure and go through in order to get the perfume itself. She was parting with all of that. But not only that, but the second thing is that she was also parting with any chance of having a future income because the perfume she was pouring out was her livelihood. It was what was going to bring people into her job, who was going to bring new customers, who was going to give her the opportunity to continue making money. And that is what she was pouring out. So this woman was not only parting with what she had, she was going to part with what she could have had in the future. What can we take from the story is that this woman surrendered everything. I think that when we hear the word surrender, especially in church, you know, we have a message that's preached, and we have an altar call, and who wants to surrender their lives to Jesus? And we come and we say, yes, like I surrender my life, I give my life, and I give everything that I am. But sometimes what's going on is we're not surrendering everything. We're only surrendering certain parts, the parts that we feel we can let go of. But there are parts that we actually hold on to. And so by whole heart surrender, I think that what it means is it's an example of what this woman did. She parted not only with her past, but she surrendered her present and she surrendered her future to Jesus. Surrender is not an easy thing. Surrender is not a one-time thing. But surrender opens up room and space so that God can come in and fill the God gaps in your life. So he can step in and take his place in your life. But surrender is not always easy. I mean, can you imagine doing what this woman had done? Giving up not only a year's worth of salary and everything that you had done and all the hard work that you had to do and everything you had to endure to get to where you were, to be able to afford that jar of perfume. Not only did she have to give that up, but she also gave up the opportunity of anything that she could receive in the future, of any income that she could have made in the future. So this woman surrendered her past, her present, and her future. When we talk about having to break away from our will, we're in a position right now where, like I said, a lot of things aren't going like you planned. A lot of things aren't going the way that you expected. And you're having to tear away from your will, from the things I wanted to do, from the things I had planned, from the future that I had already gotten prepared for. I have to tear away from that. When you have to break away from your will and what you want and what you need, you get left with one thing. You feel broken. You feel broken. And so a lot of us, I think, right now might feel like we're in a broken place because you feel like nothing's going your way. You don't have anything going on your side. And so a lot of us might find ourselves in a broken place. But here's what I want to do real quick. We just talked about this woman surrendered her past, her present, her future. In other words, she gave up her own will and she took on God's will for her life. Gave up everything, walked away from everything so that she could embrace God's will for her life. But when you do that, when you've surrendered everything, when you've given up everything, and you feel like you don't have anything left, what do you do when you feel that way? What do you do when you feel broken? What do you do when your will is completely shattered and you're just like, well, what do I do next? What do I do next? I don't have a church to go to right now. I don't have this to do. I don't, my job, I'm not working right now. My kids, I don't know what to do anymore to keep them entertained. How are we going to continue to do this cycle? And so many things not going the way that we expected. What do you do when you find yourself in a place where your will is just completely shattered and you don't know what's coming next? I want to turn your attention to the book of Luke, chapter 22, verse 19. Luke shifts our attention from this woman breaking a jar of perfume to Jesus, who finds himself in a special moment with his disciples, and he's breaking bread. So Luke shifts our attention from breaking a jar to breaking bread. Luke chapter 22 verse 19 says like this, talking about Jesus. He says, "And he took bread, he gave thanks, and he broke it. And he gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" Now, let's take a second here. When we talk about breaking bread, a lot of times we refer to that as, we're going to invite people over to our house. We're going to have a nice dinner. We're going to enjoy each other's company. We're going to fellowship, do all of that. Me personally, I'm the type of person who doesn't necessarily enjoy being a hostess. Not because I don't like having people over at where I live or at my house or anything. It's just, I just feel like I'm not a great hostess. So I struggle sometimes. I have this anxiety of like, are people going to be entertained? Are they going to have fun? Are they not going to have fun? Are they going to leave this party and say, that was boring? Like, those are the thoughts running through my head as I'm trying to get ready for a get together. Right? So it's not something that I necessarily like to do. I love going to other people's houses. I love having people over, but I don't like being the hostess, the person in charge of making sure that, you know, the party or the gathering is going and that it's fun and it's exciting and people are enjoying each other. I'm not necessarily the person that enjoys that part, right? But when we're talking about breaking bread, we're talking about inviting people over to our home. And what do we have to do? We have to prepare a meal. We have to put together some type of entertainment. Maybe we plan we're going to watch a movie, we're going to listen to music, we're going to play some games. You're in charge kind of planning out how the night is going to go, right? And so a lot of times when you have to do that, it requires what? It requires, well, for one, you know, buying things, using your resources to buy things. Maybe you buy food, maybe you buy a game, maybe you buy a movie, maybe you buy something that's going to be some sort of entertainment, right? So it requires giving a little bit of yourself because you have to make the time to be there. You have to be present. You have to be physically and emotionally present so that you can be with your guests and you can host them, right? So it takes a little bit of a sacrifice. It takes your resources, it takes your energy, it takes your time, right? It takes opening up your home, which our home sometimes can be the most safe, vulnerable place that we have. It's our home. It's my place where I go to be me. It's the place where I go to feel safe. It's the place where I go to unwind, to relax. And here I am opening up my home to other people. So it takes a little bit of personal sacrifice as you're getting ready to host a dinner party or any type of party or gathering in your home, right? But this is what Jesus is doing. He's breaking bread with his disciples. Now, this is going on during the Last Supper. And mind you, what I want us to consider during this time that Jesus is breaking bread with his disciples is Jesus is in a broken place. Jesus is in a broken place. I think that one mistake a lot of times that we make is we see Jesus for all his glory and everything that he did and the overcoming and the fact that he went to the cross and he took the suffering and he took the sacrifice and he took all the pain and then he died and then he resurrected 3 days later, and that's the only part that we look at sometimes. But there was moments in Jesus' life when he was in a broken place. He was about to be crucified. He knew he had to die. He knew that he had to suffer. He knew that his will had to be broken. In fact, he prayed to God and he said, if this cup can pass. Basically, he said, God, if I don't have to go through this, if this doesn't have to happen, fine by me. Jesus was okay if this doesn't have to happen. So Jesus was in a broken place. I'm sure he felt he was human. He took on our human flesh. He was in a broken place. He felt the pain. He felt the fear. He felt the anxieties. It says that when he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane that he was sweating blood. And a lot of scholars believe that happened because of the great amount of stress and pressure that Jesus found himself under. To sweat drops of blood. Can you imagine the pressure? Can you imagine the stress that he felt from what he was about to go through and what he knew he had to do? Jesus was in a broken place. But as he's praying to the Father, he says, if this cup can pass. But he says a key word, yet your will be done. Surrendering is not always easy. Surrendering takes saying, God, this is what I want. This is how I want things to be. This is what I want for my future. This is what I want in my relationship. This is what I want to see in my family. Yet, your will be done. Yet is the key word. saying, I surrender my will, no matter what I want, no matter how I want it to look, and I say, God, but your will be done. We are living right now in a time, and I think not just right now, but every day, where control is one of our biggest challenges, because we hold on tight. We hold on tight to the things that we have. We hold on tight to the things that we love, the things that we think that we can't part with. We're holding on tight and steady, and we don't want to let go. And God sometimes is saying, you know what? You know what the hardest thing about throwing a surprise party is? Trying to get the person to get in the car so they can go there, so you can take them to the party. That's one of the biggest challenges that you can have, is trying to create enough distraction so that you can get the person to go where you want them to go without asking all these crazy questions and without trying to ruin the surprise itself, and get them there just so you can give them the surprise. And I think a lot of times God is constantly saying, you know what? I have something so awesome, so amazing planned for you. I have big, beautiful, bold things in store for your life if you could just let go. If you could just release your grasp on what you're holding on to right now, then we can go. Then my will can be done. And you're going to see it's so much better than everything that you are imagining. Ephesians 3:20 says, what God is able to do abundantly, exceedingly more than I could ever think or imagine. Meaning anything that I picture in my mind will never meet what God has already planned out and ordained for my life. And God sometimes is just saying, can you just release your grasp? If you release your grasp on some things, I can give you in your hands what I have for you. Surrender is not always easy. Breaking your will is not always easy. But just like this woman, a broken will leads to your greatest worship of who Jesus is in your life. She surrendered her past, her present, and her future. She surrendered all of it. And I think that we are in a position right now where your will might be shattered, because nothing went the way that 2020 did not go the way that you planned this year. Nothing went the way that you expected this year. And so you might find yourself in a position where your will is broken. And you might say, well, what do I do now? What do I do right now during this time that I feel like this? I want to go back to this Luke 22 verse 19 says, and he took the bread, he gave thanks, and he broke it, and gave it to them, saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. As the Gospels record the Last Supper, that breaking of the bread that Jesus had with his disciples, the Gospel of Luke is the only one that records this specific statement that Jesus made. He said, do this in remembrance of me. And I think that that's the reason why we've adopted this, I don't want to offend anybody, but this routine or this ritual of having communion. And usually communion, we'll have it a couple times a year, and usually it comes around when Easter comes around, right? On Good Friday. Why? Because we're remembering what Jesus did with his disciples, and we are now doing that with those who are around us, having Holy Communion. But what if Jesus knew the pain he was going to endure. He knew his body would be broken. He knew that his blood would be spilled. He knew everything he was going to have to go through, and he did it anyways because he did it for you and for me. What if when Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me, he was saying, you do this in remembrance of me. You break your own body. You break your own body, just like I did it for you. What do you do when you feel like you're in a broken place? You use the brokenness that you feel. You use the pressure and the stress that you feel. You use the hopelessness that you feel. And you break yourself for those around you. This may seem counterintuitive. You might say, Sadi, how do I pour myself out when I feel like I have nothing inside of me? How do I sacrifice myself when I feel like I am just lost and broken? Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. When you're in a broken place, it's easy for us to decide, you know what? Nothing's going the way I planned. I'm just going to stay here. And we wallow in that place of misery, in that place of pity. We wallow in that place of depression and anxiety and fear, and we stay there, and we make the choice that it's easier to stay there than it is to stand up. But I'm going to tell you this, I believe Jesus called us that when we are in a broken place, when we feel like we're tearing at the seams, when we feel like we have nothing left to give, is when Jesus says, break the bread. Do it in remembrance of me. It is a time when you should be pouring into other people. It is a time when you should be breathing life into other people. It is a time when you should be speaking words of encouragement. It is a time when you should be writing something that's going to give someone encouragement, when you should be posting something on your social media because the verse gave you life, and now you want to make sure someone else has something encouraging to read, to see the first minute that they get up in that morning, and so that they can take on their day and they don't feel like a failure, and they don't feel like they're giving up, and they don't feel like no one cares and no one loves them. But Jesus said, break the bread. Do this in remembrance of me. Break yourselves as I have broken my own body for you. As I have broken and given everything that I have. Do this in remembrance of me. I believe Jesus calls us to serve in the midst of our brokenness. I truly believe that all the experiences that we have, that we deal with, although they hurt, although they cause you hopelessness, although they cause you fear and anxiety, all your experiences, I believe, are meant because God needed you to go through something so you can help someone who's going to go through it too. Sometimes God can't use you unless He's made you experience something. Sometimes God can't trust you a ministry, a calling, a purpose, unless He knows that you have gone through some fire and you have built the character and the wherewithal to go through it, to deal with it, to endure it, to persevere even when it gets hard. I believe out of this time of brokenness, this time of uncertainty, there's going to be a lot that will be birthed in our hearts. Maybe God called you to make changes in your own personal life. Maybe God called you to make a change in your marriage. Maybe God called you to make a change in your family, a change in your children. Maybe God called you to make a change in your career. Maybe God said, this is not where I want you to go. Look over here. This is what I have in store for you. Someone called me last week, heartbroken because she went through a disappointment yet again. And I remember talking to her and I said, you know what? You're not the first person who's called me heartbroken because you went through a disappointment. And I told her, I want to remind you that disappointments, although they hurt, although they feel bad, although you feel rejected, you feel like something just didn't go your way, disappointments is God closing the chapter on a part of your life and saying, this is not what I had for you. We're done with this. I've learned to see disappointment as a blessing. I've learned to see disappointment in a new perspective because I've learned that sometimes God has to disappoint me so that I can close that chapter of my life and I can put a period on that situation and I can say, I'm moving on, God. because I know you have something else for me. What I had, what I was doing was not it. But now, if I follow you, if I follow your lead, if I do as you told me, as if I break myself so that I can serve people and love them and be obedient to you and do the next thing, I know that then, God, I walk straight into the will that you have for my life. My broken will be God's greatest worship. It'll be all that I have, surrendering everything that I have. Not just parts of me. Not just, God, I'm surrendering my ministry. Not just, God, I'm surrendering my job. Not just, God, I'm surrendering this problem, this situation, this disagreement that I had. It's, God, I'm surrendering everything. I'm surrendering my past, everything I went through, everything I encountered, everything that hurt me. I'm surrendering my present, everything I want to do but is not happening for me right now. And I surrender my future, everything I have planned for. Yet I know that your plans are greater than mine. I surrender my past, my present, and my future. And I believe that God, during this season of our lives, during this season that the entire world is encountering, is a perfect time for God to start birthing purpose out of you, out of your broken will. So I encourage you, if you feel you find yourself in that position, you find yourself where frustrated, and you just don't know what to do next. You want to know God's will for your life? Do the next thing. Do the next thing. If you're not sure what tomorrow you're supposed to do tomorrow or next week or a year from now, just be faithful to God today. Do the next thing. Be obedient. Surrender. And like I said, surrender is not easy. And I've come to learn, surrender is not something I can just do once. Surrender has to be a daily choice. And for me, lately surrender has been every second, every minute, every hour of my day. Taking a step back and saying, God, I release my hands. I release my grasp on what I want so that you can give me what you have. Surrender is not always easy. Surrender is not always easy, but God's will is always good for your life. Can I pray with you this evening? Wherever you're at, if you want to close your eyes, I don't know the need that you have. I don't know the challenge, the struggle that you face right now in this moment. I don't know where you find your will. Is it broken? Is it not? But I want to pray for you this evening. I want to pray for the courage and the strength that you need to surrender today. For the courage and the strength that you need to let go. To say, God, this is how I want it, yet your will be done in my life. I've discovered that the surrendering part hurts a little bit more than trying to have control. And I don't want to shatter your bubble. I don't want to shatter your whatever encouragement, whatever hope you've received from this message tonight. But I do want to tell you the truth. Sometimes the letting go and the surrendering hurts a lot. And it's difficult and it takes a lot. But once you step outside of that place and you step into God's will for your life, you will see how worth it and that God's will is good all the time. Father God, we come before you this evening. I thank you, God, for this time. I thank you for each individual, Father, that is watching us over this live stream right now. I bless, Father, every home, every family, every man, every woman, every child, every teenager, God, every young adult that is watching us, Father, at this very moment, God. I bless them, God. I pray, Father, for your favor, your grace, Father, your goodness over their lives, your compassion and your mercy, God. I pray, Father, that as we continue to walk, Father, down this road, as we continue to walk this path, as we walk alongside Jesus, Father, that we are coming to you, Father, every day, every night, every minute, every hour, Father, surrendering everything that we have to you, God. That although, Father, things did not look the way that we wanted them, God, things did not go the way that we expected, Father, that we are able, Father, to give up our will, Father, and take on yours, God. That we are able to love and serve, to encourage and speak life despite how I feel, despite how we feel, despite the circumstances that we are going through, God. That we are able, Father, to serve you, God, in your purpose for this world. That we can be as Jesus, Father, and say, God, if my will, Father, can be done, but if not, Father, if not, your will be done in my life. I pray, Father, that we surrender everything to you, that we surrender our past, everything that we've gone through, everything that we still carry, all the baggage that we still wheel around, God, everything, Father, that is stuck, Father, in the heart, in the recess of our heart, God, in our minds, that we surrender everything, God, that we are carrying, God, that we surrender, Father, the present, everything I see right now, everything that I think is good, everything that I think is bad, God, that we surrender what I'm seeing right now in the present moment to you. And that I surrender, Father, we surrender the future. Everything that we want to see, everything that we want to encounter, God. That we surrender, Father, all of it so that your will can be done in our lives. We thank you for this time. I give you praise for what you are doing, and I give you praise, Father, for what you will continue to do. You are faithful, you are good, you are loving and kind. We love you and we need you. In your Son's heavenly name we pray. Amen. Amen. God bless you guys. I do hope that your week continues well. I pray that God brings protection, that brings grace, and brings covering over you and your entire family, and that wherever you go, that God's will and his purpose shines in your life. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful night.